Hello, I'm Bill McDonough, and it's a great privilege to be able to be here and receive this great distinction and award from the Detroit Audubon Society. I'm truly privileged because it represents a recognition of something I think really important to all of us, which has to do with how do we love all the children of all species for all time in a way that makes sense, and it's something that people will want to do for lots of reasons, not just the obvious one of our love of the natural world and our hope for its longevity and delightful diversity. I'm here, I think, because we've been able to do something that has been great for business as well as good for the environment. And I'd like to talk about that for a few minutes because we're here to talk about the Rouge Manufacturing Center in Dearborn for the Ford Motor Company. The reason this project is so important to all of us is that it represents an opportunity presented by Bill Ford in 1999 for the revitalization of the center of industrial production from the early part of the century that transfixed the world, that mass production became something that allowed for the ubiquity of products and informed manufacturing processes worldwide. Henry Ford's great Rouge Center, the first integrated manufacturing center where raw materials came in one end and finished cars came out the other, over 1,000 acres. And what we see today is the idea of refreshing American industry to allow it to perpetuate itself on this continent. Given today's concerns for jobs and for clean production, this is a really important idea. Because what Ford Motor Company did by saying that they would revitalize the River Rouge plant is they declared themselves native to Dearborn. This is a very interesting idea because typically American industries don't declare themselves native to someplace. They pick up and move on when they find themselves with a brownfield site with old equipment. They don't necessarily decide to revitalize their facilities and keep going. And in this case, Ford Motor Company decided to do that in Dearborn. Now, besides keeping all the jobs and the infrastructure intact, they also articulated a vision of the future which would be inspiring, I think, to a lot of people, especially, one hopes, to their shareholders, because the assignment to revitalize the River Rouge did not come with an open checkbook. It came with a very specific instruction to make this supremely cost-effective so that American manufacturing could stay on shore and that shareholder value was being created and preserved. And so that's really the assignment that was here. And that's the great challenge and the great delight that results from this project. We started out by imagining in a room we call the Rouge Room at Ford World Headquarters what it would be like to imagine the highest quality of performance and production on every level, from a facility through ultimately to the products in the short and the long term. And so probably 1,000 people came through the Rouge Room from the Ford Motor Company and as advisors, looking at and creating a series of goals, strategies, metrics, all based on the principles of quality production, quality workplace, quality people, quality of life. And so as the metrics were reviewed and how we'd be measuring on our performance, we realized obviously we have economic performance, but we also had social performance and environmental performance. And so this is what we call the triple top line. The idea that we could create economic revenue, we could create social revenue, and we could create ecological revenue simultaneously was a delightful prospect. And so Bill Ford and the senior team at Ford led the team of professionals with their instructions to deliver on that promise. And so I'm pleased to say that we were able to do that for Ford. And let me just point out that this project is immensely cost effective for them. It came in as planned on schedule. It came in on the budgets that were established for it. And in fact, we were able to save large amounts of money, especially in the area of stormwater management, using ecological engineering rather than conventional engineering with chemicals and pipes. This is fantastic. On the heating, ventilation, and cooling exercise, the building has 4 big units instead of hundreds, and they effectively deliver fresh air tempered to the workers in a delightful way without requiring a lot of ducting in the building, so they have complete flexible manufacturing. They can use the ceilings for conveyor belts and for changing out different systems over time. A marvelous prospect that will save massive amounts of energy while providing terrific levels of indoor air quality and thermal comfort. It's that kind of thing that has generated such excitement for me about this project. Let me discuss the specifics a little later. Let me just start by describing the Rouge Manufacturing Center from an architect's perspective, because that's where I come from. Clearly, it's a business proposition, so it's meant to be immensely profitable for the company and its shareholders, and the people who work there are meant to be in a place that's delightful and allows them to prosper in their work and achieve high levels of productivity while being given access to the best in health and light and air and so on and so forth. So those things were a primary assignment. But the secondary assignment was to not sacrifice any level of quality while we perform that economic exercise. And so let me tell you what we did here. By setting the goals for, say, soil health as we will make soil clean enough for our children to play in. This is not parts per billion of this and that. And the same thing with water. We didn't say let's make water meet some arbitrary standard or some chemical level of criteria. We said, let's make the water clean enough to swim in. Let's make it healthy. So we return it to the river in a sustaining condition, in a delightful prospect. So the fish are happy, the birds are happy, the regulators are happy, everybody's happy. So those were the assignments, and we were able to deliver on that promise. The promise, which is really exciting to me, is a much larger one than most people realize. Clearly, there are people, like an Audubon Society, that could say this building and this project and its landscape are for the birds. And that would be true. It is. We saw within days of planting the green roof on the roof of the truck plant that the birds arrived. I think within 2 or 3 days we saw nesting killdeer. We saw mallard families landing in the constructed wetlands and so on within days of their inundation. So that kind of thing is magnificent, but clearly that wouldn't be adequate to any shareholder meeting, and so that isn't even the primary focus. The primary focus is economics and production, but these are the benefits that accrue with it. And so let me give you the frame conditions of our design work. What we're looking at is the idea of a place that could be a positive contribution to the world, not a less negative contribution or a less bad contribution, because being bad but less so is not being good. I mean, it's ironic that in the English language a double negative is a positive. In Russian, a double negative is a reinforced negative. If you're not coming in Moscow, you're not coming. So being less bad is not being good. What Ford was trying to do here is be good, and they were, and they did. And the idea here is to follow the laws of nature while we perform on the economic framework. And so let me put forward the vision that this represents as a symbol of hope and a sort of a key to the temple of hope, because the strategy is based on the idea not just of how do we love all the children of all species for all time, which is part of the question, a very Jeffersonian question, because I'm coming to you from Charlottesville, Virginia, where I live, and I've had the great privilege here of living in a house designed by Thomas Jefferson. And so the idea that we would look at the Declaration of Independence as a design assignment, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is an exciting one. And so we look at life, and we celebrate life and its full diversity. So that's part of what we're trying to deal with here. On the other hand, as we look at the technological requirements of the future, the question we're asking is, how can we hope for a delightful, safe, and healthy world that is full of clean water and renewable energy, that is economically, ecologically, equitably, and elegantly enjoyed? How could we perform that service as human beings? Wouldn't that be a marvelous thing? And so we start by saying, is it delightful? Well, would you like it miserable? Safe and healthy. Anybody looking for unsafe and unhealthy? Clean water, who has a problem with that? Renewable power. I mean, we believe the Earth should be 100% nuclear powered and that fusion is a great idea. And thank God, literally, that it's there in the form of the sun, 93 million miles away, and that we can take that kinetic energy in the form of photons and start to convert it to various practical purposes, just the way nature does. And isn't that a marvelous prospect? So we have that there. Economically, this is a very economical project. Equitably, is it fair? Well, it's a marvelous thing that workers can have daylight and fresh air and good thermal comfort in a place that's making oxygen and providing habitat. It's a delightful place to go to work and tell your children about. And then, is it ecologically intelligent? Well, part of what we're going to measure in terms of progress is how many birds return to the site. Now, this is not reducing your ecological footprint. A lot of people in the environmental world say we must reduce our ecological footprint. Well, I think if all we have behind our footprint is asphalt, that is two words assigning blame in our lexicon, then all we're leaving behind is death and destruction of the Earth's surface and its ability to generate life. And so the idea that growth is good is clearly seen in nature. Wouldn't it be marvelous if we could see that in the world of human production? So here's a case where Ford Motor Company is building an auto plant very practically, but at the same time we're increasing the amount of wetlands, we're increasing the amount of oxygen production, we're increasing the amount of habitat. So the world's getting better as humans move across it with their artifice. This is a whole different adventure and a great game. So I'd like to just mention three areas of design consideration that you might find amusing, perhaps, or intriguing, perhaps, or perhaps even inspirational, because I know it worked for us. If we look at Einstein's special theory of relativity and look at E equals mc squared scientifically, clearly with c being the speed of light, a very large number, 186,000 miles per second, and you square it, it's an infinitely huge number. And so therefore, if E equals mc squared, then c squared is infinitely huge. So if m is in any way a positive, E is immensely huge. So that means that Hiroshima would disappear because there's a lot of E and a small amount of M. So that's the science. But when you look at it poetically, what it tells us is that E is energy in the sun, M is the earth and mass, and you connect it to at the speed of light, and then we take that energy, about 5,000 times more than humans need to function, and we bring it as income. And if you all went home tonight and the bank said you had 5,000 times more income than you need to operate, you'd figure out your home economics. We will solve the energy problem because we have solar income. What we don't have is mass income, and so occasional meteorite. So if we toxify the mass with production that is deleterious, or we find ourselves taking the chromium from South Africa and contaminating the Earth's surface through small products that get distributed and so on, then we'll never recover from that. So what we're looking at is what we call cradle to cradle, which is the title of a book I wrote with German chemist Michael Braungart. The idea is that we would design all the materials to go in closed cycles, either biological cycles like our green roof or tree or food and so on, back to soil to reinvigorate it and make it healthy, literally. And on the other hand, technical materials that can go back to industry forever, like a car or a building or a computer or so on. And so we call that technical nutrition. So that's a marvelous thing. If we look at the other great invention of our era, scientifically, or discovery, it's DNA. And if we look at DNA, here we have Crick and Watson realizing that energy comes from the sun, the mass of the earth. These are both inert. This is physics, this is chemistry. And then you put the two together at the speed of light, and what do you get? Biology, life itself. And what is the characteristic of that life? Well, first, it has to be growing. As we sit here talking to each other, our children are growing. That's a wonderful thing. A tree that grows is good. Growth is good in nature. And so the earth is becoming more and more fecund, more species, more habitat, more soil. It's almost a second law of thermodynamics on its head. It's a form of negative entropy. There's a concentration of a dispersed form of energy in the solar flux into the logs, into the soil. And so we're building fecundity, we're building biodiversity. Isn't that exciting? Especially for bird people. So the idea that you've got this accrual of life is a very exciting prospect, and growth is good. The second thing we need is an outside form of energy, free energy, comes from the sun. And the third, an open system of chemicals moving through our metabolism to the benefit of to our synthesis and our reproduction. So that's what Crick decided in 1962 he would call the nature of vitalism, what it meant to be a living thing. So the idea that a building and a site could become almost like a living thing, what is high tech? I mean, how many buildings do you know that made oxygen lately? and purified water and sequestered carbon and fixed nitrogen and distilled water and build soil and accrue solar energy as fuel and make complex sugars and food, change colors with the seasons, create microclimates and self-replicate. It's hard to imagine a richer agenda. That's a tree. And when you start to think about a building that's like a tree, that means cities could be like forests. This is good news for all of us, not just the birds. So that's the first frame condition that I think was intriguing here. The second was the one where essentially Ford Motor Company declared itself native to Dearborn. Now, what does that mean? Well, at the Hanford nuclear plant, where we make our plutonium for the bombs and missiles, they had a symposium of senior scientists to discuss how to mark the ground where we've stored the plutonium so that even an extraterrestrial 5,000 years from now wouldn't dare to dig. Well, we would call this the semiology of extreme danger. So how do you mark the ground so that no one would dare to dig? Well, what is that? And the Yakima, who were there for another meeting, found out what the scientists were doing and started laughing. And they said, well, you know, you don't need to worry about this. We'll tell them where it is. Well, they aren't leaving. They expect to be there 5,000 years from now speaking with extraterrestrials, I guess. But the idea that a culture could imagine that it would be here for 5,000 years more, communicating their stories, knowing their stories, is a phenomenal thing. And that's what it means to be native to a place. You're not leaving. See, I don't know that General Motors declared itself native to Flint. So the idea that we would just pack up and go somewhere else has been part of our history in this country. And we've used a brute force kind of protocol where we just add energy when we don't think we've done enough, have enough power in a system. We just, if we're too cold, we add energy. If we're too hot, we add energy. And we've all forgotten where the sun is. So what Ford has done here is declared itself native to Dearborn. They're not leaving. And Dearborn gets better because they stayed here. And this is an exciting, exciting prospect. It really is one of the most magnificent ones you can imagine. But I think in the end, we have to look at the third and probably the most important in terms of the inspirational aspects of the River Rouge. Not only does it create habitat and purify water and have parking lots that absorb water, and it provides habitat and this, that, and the other thing. All of these marvelous protocols are all cost effective and are all ready to be copied. The Ford company has offered to the design world and the world of industry a protocol which allows us to imagine that the rest of the world can copy them. They're providing this astonishing leadership in the business world, producing shareholder value while they produce ecological and social value. This is a magnificent moment, an historic moment in the history of industry. And it's a moment that I think rises to the occasion of the River Rouge, something that earlier in this century represented the most advanced thinking in industrial process, and I think in this point in history can once again represent the most advanced thinking in the design of industrial sites and the quality of the workplace. So the business proposition being hugely successful is a key element for other people to want to copy this, and I think Ford Motor Company delivers on that promise while it delivers this larger vision that Mr. Ford represents, and this opportunity that we can all see that this is just the harbinger of something really magical that might be coming. And we might see it transferred to the vehicles where they start to take on the same characteristics of technical nutrition, biological nutrition, powered by solar energy, the kind of promise inherent in Ford's Model U concept car, which we helped with in 2003, a cradle-to-cradle car, if you can imagine. So it's an exciting time to be alive, and it's an exciting time for us to be thinking about very cost-effective programs that are for the birds. And I'm privileged to be honored by you. You honor me, and I honor you for having the kind of leadership and care for these issues that allow it to stay front and center on our national agenda and our commercial agenda while we pursue our work in the professional world. So once again, thank you very much, and I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person. I have small children, and I have to be a daddy, and so I'm loving my children for this time, and so we can love all the children for all species for all time. Thank you.